"You are not even worth what you eat," shouted Sheikh Khalid al-Mansour in Arabic, raising his golden glass with a smile that dripped with disdain. The investors applauded, not understanding a single word. The interpreter translated it into sweet phrases, and everyone toasted, convinced they were being honored, without realizing they had just been insulted in front of the entire room. That night, at the most luxurious hotel in Las Vegas, the arrogance of a powerful man was about to seal a multi-million-dollar contract. But something unexpected would change the course of everything. Before we begin this story full of tension and surprises, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching us, and leave your like to keep following along. The chandeliers above glittered like frozen waterfalls, each crystal reflecting the neon pulse of Las Vegas through the panoramic windows. The entire top floor of the Mirage Grand Hotel had been transformed into a banquet of power. Polished mahogany tables, velvet chairs, silver cutlery aligned with surgical precision. Investors in tailored suits whispered in eager tones, their eyes darting between their champagne glasses and the double doors at the far end of the hall. They had flown in from New York, Chicago, Dallas, desperate for a piece of what was promised to be the deal of the decade. When the doors opened, silence fell like a curtain. Sheikh Khalid al-Mansour entered with the kind of composure that made men instinctively straighten their ties. Dressed in a flawless white kandura, a golden Rolex peeking from his sleeve, he walked with the assurance of someone who had been bowed to his entire life. His smile was thin, rehearsed, almost carved into his face. It was a mask polished enough to pass as charm, but sharp enough to slice through dignity. The investors rose, applauding as though they were greeting a monarch, not realizing the contempt behind his gaze. Grace Miller stood at the far corner of the room, balancing a silver tray with crystal goblets. The uniform itched against her skin, and her black shoes pinched her toes, but she kept her posture steady. She had been trained to move invisibly, to serve without being noticed. Yet her eyes couldn't help but follow Khalid. She caught the flicker of his smirk as he whispered something in Arabic to his interpreter, a short man who immediately scribbled in a notebook, his face pale as if carrying a secret too heavy for his own hands. From the distance, Grace understood every syllable. "Look at them, greedy dogs. They clap even before I feed them lies." The words crawled under her skin. She lowered her gaze, pressing her lips together, pretending to adjust the tray. No one could know she understood him. Her job was her mother's medicine, her mother's breath. She could not risk it. Not tonight. Not ever. Khalid reached the center of the room, placed his hands lightly on the back of a chair, and allowed the interpreter to announce him. "Gentlemen, the Sheikh welcomes you with great respect. Tonight, he offers friendship, prosperity, and a future of gold." Applause thundered again. Khalid sat, his smile never faltering. Only Grace saw the disdain in his eyes, the way he leaned back as if the entire table of wealthy men smelled foul. Glasses clinked, contracts shuffled, the interpreter's voice polished every barb into a compliment, but Grace, from her quiet corner, carried the burden of the truth. And with every laugh that echoed through the glittering hall, her heart beat harder, as though warning her that silence could not last forever. The meeting had barely begun, yet the atmosphere in the room was already heavy, thick with a kind of reverence that bordered on fear. Khalid leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting on the stem of a crystal goblet, as if it were a throne's scepter. Every movement was deliberate, calculated to remind the room that he was the center of gravity. The investors leaned forward, hanging on every pause, waiting for the interpreter to spill the next promise of fortune. "Tell them," Khalid murmured in Arabic, his tone dripping with derision, "that I see their hunger. Tell them I admire it." The interpreter hesitated, sweat glistening at his temples. Then, in careful English, "The Sheikh says he admires your vision and your ambition, gentlemen." Smiles spread across the table. Heads nodded, pens clicked, ready to write history on paper. Khalid took a slow sip of wine, his false smile widening. Grace, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres, passed behind the row of investors. Her steps were steady, her face expressionless, but her ears caught every syllable. Hunger, he had called it. Not ambition, not vision, hunger. She knew what he meant. Scavengers, desperate men who would bow to him for crumbs. Her grip on the tray tightened, her knuckles whitening. She lowered her eyes quickly, hoping no one noticed the storm flickering in them. One of the investors, a tall man with silver hair and a Texas accent, raised his glass. "To Sheikh Khalid, a true visionary," the others echoed, their voices a chorus of blind admiration. Khalid inclined his head politely, his mask unbroken. Yet in Arabic he muttered, low enough for only his interpreter and Grace to hear, "Blind cattle. They would sign their souls away for a drop of oil." The interpreter shifted uncomfortably, stammering as he reshaped the venom into honey. "The Sheikh says he values your trust and partnership." More applause followed, filling the room with a hollow kind of triumph. Grace paused by the far wall, setting her tray down for a moment, pretending to straighten a linen napkin. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She wanted to scream the truth, but the image of her mother lying in bed at home, pale and fragile, tightened around her throat like a chain. Khalid spread his arms, letting his kandura flow around him like a robe of power. "They do not deserve even the bread on this table," he whispered in Arabic, his smile gleaming for the cameras flashing nearby. The interpreter forced another lie into English, and the investors erupted with laughter and cheers, believing themselves blessed. And in the corner, unseen, Grace's heart pounded with a secret only she carried. Contracts lay spread across the polished table like treasure maps, each page promising wealth beyond measure. The investors leaned in, pens ready, their eyes sparkling with the anticipation of signatures that would cement their names in history. The interpreter stood rigid beside Khalid, his hands trembling slightly as he prepared to weave another net of polished lies. Khalid's voice was smooth as silk when he spoke in Arabic, but his words were razor blades. "Look at them. Fat men chasing gold like children chasing candy. They believe I will share when in truth I will own them." The interpreter swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing visibly. "The Sheikh says he believes in equal partnership, a vision where prosperity is shared by all," he announced with false enthusiasm. The room erupted in satisfied murmurs. Grace moved between tables, refilling glasses, her tray balanced effortlessly, though her body felt heavy. Every word sliced into her like a secret wound. She kept her eyes down, but inside her chest burned. She thought of her mother's medicine waiting at home, lined up on the kitchen counter like soldiers holding the line between life and death. Losing this job meant losing that battle, so she bit her lip until it bled, swallowed the truth, and kept pouring wine. An investor from Boston adjusted his cufflinks and asked, "Sheikh Khalid, what makes this venture different from the others we've seen?" The interpreter translated the question into Arabic. Khalid smirked, tapping his gold ring against the glass. "Because fools like you will sign without reading, and by the time you realize, it will be too late." He leaned back, amused by his own cruelty. The interpreter hesitated, then forced the venom into silk. "The Sheikh says this venture is built on trust unlike any other you have encountered." Grace caught the flicker of Khalid's grin as the room applauded. She pressed the tray tighter against her chest, her nails digging into the wood. The urge to shout the truth clawed at her throat, but she turned away, hiding in the shadows of the marble column, whispering under her breath, "Not yet, not yet." Across the room, the investors toasted again, their laughter echoing against the glass walls. To them, this was a celebration of opportunity. To Khalid, it was a masquerade of power where only he understood the script. And to Grace, it was a prison of silence, one that threatened to crush her every time she heard the truth twisted into lies. The night deepened, and with it, the illusion of harmony grew stronger. Waiters glided between tables with trays of oysters and caviar, the air thick with the scent of truffle oil and expensive cigars. Laughter rippled through the investors, each man convinced he was on the edge of a golden future. But beneath the polished surface, Khalid's eyes gleamed like a predator stalking prey. He leaned slightly toward his interpreter and spoke in Arabic, his voice low but sharp enough for Grace to catch as she passed with a tray of champagne. "They will sign everything tonight, and tomorrow I will remind them they are nothing but cattle in my pasture. They think they negotiate with me. In truth, I negotiate with no one." The interpreter's hands twitched. His mouth opened, then closed, before he forced himself to smile. "The Sheikh says he is honored to share this evening with men of such strength and wisdom," he declared in English. The investors chuckled proudly, shoulders squaring at the compliment. Khalid only sipped his wine, his false smile stretching, his eyes glinting with cruelty that no one else saw. Grace stopped near the far end of the room, pretending to fix a folded napkin on the table. Her jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. She wanted to scream, to tell them what he had really said, but fear coiled around her ribs like barbed wire. Her mother's face flashed in her mind, the pale skin, the shallow breaths, the medicine bottles lined up on the nightstand. If Grace lost this job, there would be no refills, no lifeline. She pressed her hand to her chest, grounding herself, whispering in silence, "Not yet." An investor from Los Angeles raised a glass. "To partnerships that last a lifetime." Khalid tilted his head politely. His lips curled into that same rehearsed smile as he replied in Arabic, "Their lifetimes will be short once they are stripped of everything they own." His interpreter, visibly pale, hesitated for the briefest moment. The pause was so thin it almost vanished, but Grace caught it. Then came the lie, smoothed and dressed. "The Sheikh says this partnership will endure for generations." Cheers filled the room, blind and hollow. Khalid's laughter echoed quietly behind his glass, inaudible to most, but Grace heard it like thunder. Every time his words twisted into venom, and every time the interpreter transformed them into silk, she felt the weight inside her chest grow heavier. She turned her eyes toward the glittering skyline of Las Vegas beyond the windows, the city alive with lights and illusions. It felt like a mirror of this room, bright, beautiful, and completely false. And yet she stayed silent, her truth locked away, waiting for the moment when silence would no longer be bearable. The weight of the evening pressed down on everyone, though only a few could feel its true heaviness. For the investors, the pressure came from ambition, the hunger to close the deal of a lifetime. For Khalid, it was the thrill of control, the satisfaction of bending men to his will. And for Grace, it was the unbearable tension of secrets crawling beneath her skin. Near the center of the hall, a minor mishap shifted the atmosphere. A young waiter, no older than 19, approached the table with a bottle of Bordeaux. His hands trembled, and as he poured, a drop of red spilled onto the pristine white tablecloth. Silence fell, sharp and immediate. The waiter's face drained of color. Khalid's gaze snapped to him, cold and merciless. He spoke in Arabic, his tone cutting through the quiet like a knife. "Pathetic. Even a dog would serve with more dignity." The interpreter stiffened, eyes darting nervously to the investors. After a second too long, he forced out the polished lie. "The Sheikh says accidents happen, but what matters is the spirit of service." The investors nodded kindly, brushing off the mistake with easy laughter. But Khalid never looked away from the boy, his lips twisting into a smile that dripped with silent threat. The waiter bowed quickly, nearly tripping over his own shoes as he retreated. Grace's stomach turned. She had heard every word, and her hands shook around the tray she held. Her chest ached with the effort to remain invisible. The boy's humiliation replayed in her mind, too close to the fate she feared for herself. Her mother's face flickered before her again. The tubes, the slow breaths, the whispered pleas for more time. If she spoke up, she would lose everything. If she stayed silent, she betrayed not only the boy but also herself. She dug her nails into the palm of her hand until the sting anchored her back into silence. Khalid turned his attention back to the table, his smile restored, as though the incident had never happened. He raised his glass slightly and muttered in Arabic, "They are blind, these Americans. They do not see me crushing them in front of their very eyes." The interpreter smoothed the venom again. "The Sheikh says he respects how open you are to partnership. More applause, more cheers, more blindness." Grace lingered near the shadows of the wall, her heart beating like a trapped bird. Her eyes traced the polished floor, the glittering chandeliers, the men who toasted to lies. She felt the words rising in her throat, desperate to break free. But she swallowed them down once more, her silence as suffocating as the night itself. The night stretched on, and the air inside the grand hall grew thick with smoke and ambition. The investors leaned closer to Khalid, their pens tapping against documents, their voices eager as they spoke of profits and expansion. They didn't see the shadows flickering behind Khalid's smile, or the way his eyes glinted like a blade ready to strike. Khalid whispered again in Arabic, his voice velvet and venom at once. "They line up like lambs before the slaughter. Each man here will beg to give me more, and I will take it all. They think I honor them, but I despise every one of them." The interpreter froze, his throat tightening. He darted a quick look at Khalid, then back at the expectant investors. With a nervous smile, he translated, "The sheikh says he feels honored to be in the company of such noble men." The investors nodded, some even clapping. Khalid leaned back, sipping his wine, savoring the irony. Grace was nearby, arranging a platter of desserts on the side table. She heard everything. Her hands moved mechanically, placing strawberries and eclairs in perfect symmetry, but inside her chest roared with unspoken truth. She watched the interpreter's hands shake as he reshaped poison into honey, and she realized he was as trapped as she was. Only his prison was fear of Khalid's wrath. One of the younger investors, barely 30, leaned forward eagerly. "Sheikh Khalid, do you see us as equals in this project?" His voice carried both hope and naivety. Khalid chuckled softly in Arabic. "Equals? You are donkeys carrying my gold. That is all." The interpreter's face blanched. He stammered, then quickly forced a translation. "The sheikh says equality is the foundation of true partnership." The room erupted in cheers again, glasses raised high. Khalid joined them with a false smile, his laughter echoing under his breath where only Grace could hear. Grace pressed her hands against the table, steadying herself. She could almost feel her mother's frail hand slipping into hers at the hospital, whispering gratitude for every pill, every treatment bought with Grace's wages. That memory chained her silence tighter than any fear of Khalid. She closed her eyes for a moment, forcing her breath to steady, forcing the scream inside her chest to remain buried. The interpreter wiped sweat from his brow, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to keep up with Khalid's torrent of disdain. Every insult was a dagger only Grace could see, and every lie was a plaster covering the wound for men too blind to notice. The chandeliers sparkled above, as if mocking the scene below, beauty disguising rot. And in the shadows, Grace's patience thinned, like glass on the verge of shattering. The banquet reached its peak. Silver lids clattered open, revealing roasted lamb and delicacies flown in from across the world. The investors ate, drank, and laughed as if wealth were already in their pockets. Cameras flashed, glasses chimed, and the night shimmered with illusion. At the head of it all, Khalid rose slowly, commanding silence without a single word. The room hushed. Every eye turned to him. He held a golden glass in one hand, the crystal catching the chandelier's light like fire. His false smile broadened, perfectly rehearsed, hiding the contempt curling beneath it. He began to speak in Arabic, his voice smooth, resonant but laced with venom. "Tonight I feed pigs who think they are kings. They lick the floor for scraps of my wealth, and tomorrow they will crawl for more. They are not even worth what they eat." The interpreter's face drained of color. His hands trembled as every pair of eyes in the room waited for him to translate. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. After a pause that felt like thunder, he forced out the lie. "The sheikh says you are men of honor, worthy of every success you will taste tonight and beyond." The investors erupted in applause, rising from their chairs, raising their glasses high. Their voices collided into a chorus of blind celebration. "To Sheikh Khalid," they roared. Laughter and cheers filled the air, deafening in their ignorance. Khalid drank, hiding his smirk behind the rim of the golden glass. The flash of cameras immortalized his performance, painting him as a man of generosity when his words had dripped with insult. He relished the irony, his eyes glimmering with the pleasure of deceiving a room full of powerful men who didn't understand the language of their own humiliation. Grace stood frozen in the corner, a tray of empty glasses balanced against her chest. She had heard every word, every dagger slipped beneath the mask of diplomacy. Her heart pounded so hard it drowned out the applause. She stared at Khalid, her lips parted, her breath shallow. The investors clapped for lies. She carried the truth alone. Her hands trembled. She pressed the tray harder against her chest, as if it could hold her together. Her throat burned with words she had swallowed too many times. She closed her eyes briefly, and in that darkness she saw her mother's fragile body in bed, the pills lined up like fragile hope. She couldn't lose this job, but she couldn't keep the silence forever. Khalid raised his glass once more, bowing slightly, his smile radiating false charm. Around him the investors cheered again, their ignorance complete. The interpreter exhaled, relieved to have survived the moment. But Grace felt the walls closing in. The truth inside her pressed harder, begging to break free. The applause thundered through the hall, echoing against glass walls and marble floors. Investors cheered, glasses raised high, completely blind to the insult they had just celebrated. The interpreter forced a smile, though his chest rose and fell with shallow, panicked breaths. Khalid basked in their admiration, lowering his golden glass with the satisfaction of a man who believed himself untouchable. Grace stood frozen in the corner, her tray of glasses trembling in her hands. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her throat burning with the weight of every word she had swallowed tonight. She could feel her silence splitting open like a crack in glass. Her mother's image flickered before her eyes, fragile, weak, fighting for each breath. And Grace realized the medicine, the hospital bills, the sacrifices, none of it would matter if she lived her life as a shadow. Her chest tightened, her breath caught. And then, without planning it, without even knowing where the courage came from, she stepped forward. The tray rattled as she set it down on the nearest table, her hands trembling. Heads turned, investors frowning, curious why a waitress had dared interrupt their celebration. Khalid's smile faltered, confusion flashing briefly in his eyes. Grace's voice cut through the noise, steady despite the fear twisting inside her. First in Arabic, Antum la taswawna hatta thamana ma ta'kulun. Her pronunciation was flawless, the insult echoing exactly as Khalid had spat it moments before. Gasps rippled through the room. The interpreter's eyes widened in horror, his face draining of blood. Then in clear English she translated, "He said, 'You are not even worth what you eat.'" The silence that followed was deafening. Glasses froze mid-air, smiles collapsed. The investor's eyes darted from Grace to Khalid, then back again, searching for confirmation, for denial, for something that made sense of the betrayal. Khalid's mask cracked for the first time. His smile twitched, his eyes narrowing like blades. "This girl is lying," he barked in English, his accent thick, his tone sharp with fury. "She knows nothing." But Grace did not flinch. Her voice grew stronger, firmer, carrying years of buried truth. "He mocked you all night. Every compliment was a lie. Every toast was an insult. He called you greedy dogs. He said you would sign away your souls. And every word you heard was twisted." The interpreter stammered, his knees nearly buckling as he tried to speak. But no sound came. The investors stared at him, fury rising in their eyes, betrayal heavy in the air. Grace stood tall, her chest heaving, her hands trembling but her gaze unbroken. For the first time that night, she was no longer invisible. The silence she had carried alone was shattered, and the truth echoed through the room, impossible to ignore. Chaos rippled across the grand hall like a storm breaking loose. The investors erupted in a flurry of voices, chairs scraping against the polished floor, papers scattering like leaves caught in the wind. The glittering chandeliers above seemed to sway under the weight of outrage. The silver-haired Texan slammed his fist against the table. "What the hell did she just say?" His voice cut through the uproar, sharp and demanding. All eyes turned to the interpreter, who stood trembling, sweat dripping down his temple. "Tell them!" Grace's voice rang clear, unwavering, despite the fire in her chest. She stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "Tell them what he really said." The interpreter's lips moved, but no words came. His hands shook violently, as if they belonged to a man awaiting execution. Finally, his knees buckled, and he muttered, barely above a whisper, "It's true." Gasps spread across the room. Investors turned toward Khalid, their faces burning with fury. Khalid shot up from his chair, his kandura flowing around him like a wave of defiance. His smile was gone now, replaced by a sneer as sharp as broken glass. "You fools!" he thundered in Arabic, no longer hiding his contempt. "I do not need you. You are insects crawling for crumbs. My wealth could crush you all, and yet you clap like trained dogs." His voice boomed, resonating through the hall. But this time, there was no interpreter to shield him. Grace translated instantly, her voice cutting the air like a blade. "He says you are insects, that his wealth could crush you all." The Boston investor slammed his pen onto the table, tearing the contract in half. Another man tore his copy too, the paper ripping loudly in the silence that followed. Soon, pages fluttered to the floor like broken promises. "This deal is over," one declared. "We don't do business with liars." Khalid's face contorted with rage. "You will regret this," he spat, his voice trembling with fury. But the investors were already on their feet, storming toward the exit, leaving a trail of ripped contracts and shattered trust behind them. Grace stood her ground, her breathing unsteady, her hands trembling, but her eyes locked on Khalid's. For the first time, the mask of the billionaire sheikh had cracked completely. His arrogance lay exposed, naked before the very men he had sought to control. The interpreter collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. The investors didn't spare Khalid another glance. The power he wielded so effortlessly had evaporated in a single moment of truth. And at the center of it all, Grace stood like a beacon, fragile, trembling, but unbroken. The hall was nearly empty now. The roar of voices and the thunder of footsteps had faded, leaving behind only the faint echo of torn paper crunching under polished shoes. The chandeliers still glimmered above, but their light felt different. No longer a stage for arrogance, but a witness to truth unveiled. Grace stood motionless, her chest rising and falling with the rhythm of adrenaline. Her hands trembled at her sides, but her gaze remained steady. For the first time that night, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen. One by one, the investors who had stormed out returned. Their faces were no longer filled with blind ambition, but with sharp clarity. The silver-haired Texan approached first, his heavy boots echoing against the marble floor. He studied Grace, his eyes narrowing not with suspicion, but with respect. "You saved us tonight," he said firmly. "Without you, we'd have signed away everything." Grace swallowed hard, her voice shaky. I only told the truth." Another investor, the Boston man, stepped forward, tearing the last piece of his ruined contract and tossing it aside. "Truth takes courage," he said. "And courage deserves reward." Grace blinked, uncertain what he meant, until the Texan spoke again. "What's your name, miss?" "Grace Miller," she whispered. He nodded slowly, then looked at the others. "Gentlemen, I say we repay Miss Miller properly, not just with thanks, but with opportunity." Murmurs of agreement spread among the group. The Boston investor pulled out a business card and placed it on the table in front of Grace. "Full scholarship. Any university, any program you choose, we'll cover it. You should be more than a waitress hiding in the shadows. You should be the interpreter, the voice, the one people listen to." Grace's breath caught. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her throat tightened, tears burning at the corners of her eyes. She thought of her mother waiting at home and imagined telling her that all the sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Khalid stood in the corner, his face twisted with rage but powerless. His threats no longer carried weight. His empire of lies had crumbled in the span of a single night, undone by a waitress with trembling hands and unshakable honesty. Grace picked up the card, her fingers brushing the embossed letters, the promise of a future she had once believed lost. Her voice was soft but firm when she spoke. "Thank you for believing in the truth." The investors nodded one by one, raising their glasses, not for Khalid, not for false promises, but for the courage of a young woman who had refused to remain silent. The toast rang out, clear and true, filling the hall with something far rarer than gold. For the first time, Grace allowed herself to smile. In the end, it wasn't money, power, or contracts that defined the night. It was dignity. Grace proved that even the smallest voice can pierce through the loudest lies. Her courage reminded everyone that honesty is worth more than gold, and that sometimes the most invisible person in the room carries the strength to change everything. Her story is a reminder of hope. No matter how heavy the silence, truth always finds its way to the light. And when it does, it transforms not only those who hear it, but also those brave enough to speak it. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this touching story. Tell us in the comments what part moved you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss another story. Leave a like if you believe in dignity and true love. Watch the story I'll leave here on the left. I'm sure it will also move and inspire you.